ladies and gentlemen, we are going to jump into our discussion today. But before we go into our discussion today, that is the enabling culture within our organization, even personal culture for that matter, we are going to know what is culture, what is an enabling culture, what part do we play in making sure our cultures are good for us, so that, you know, when our cultures are good, it means our wellness is promoted. Now, let me introduce to you our panelists. I'm going to start with Bernard N. Simiyu. Bernard is a PhD finalist. The way those people struggle to become PhD. I mean, it's another, maybe we need another webinar so that we can be able, how do we have these titles of PhD sometime very soon? Bernard is a manager of strategy and transformation at the Nairobi Hospital. Very good. He's the right guy to talk about cultural transformation. Besides leading the strategy and transformation role at the hospital, Bernard is a management consultant with the broad experience in monitoring and evaluation, strategic development, performance management, transformation, and quality management system. He has been involved in the designing and ME research frameworks in both social science, technology, and education. This gentleman is the real deal in terms of transformation. Yes, as a task force, he was a member of a task force and sector performance standards 1 and 2 edition, arrived from Kenya Vision 2030. As a member of the Institute of Economic Affairs, he has been involved in several roundtable discussions on socio-economic policies that has huge impact on Kenya's economy. We have one of the gentlemen who is influencing the economy of Kenya. How important that is for us to tap into his wisdom. Mr. Miu is currently a PhD finalist, operations management at the University of, the University of Nairobi. Okay, we will say that as we move along. He holds an MBA operations management from the University of Nairobi and a BA in business management from University of Moi. Bernard also holds a post-qualifications in internal audit, quality management system, project management, and he is also a certified, wow, those, in one brain, all those titles, very good. He is a trained world integrated trade solutions professional. He'll tell us what that means when he comes to introduce himself. Now, let us go to our next panelist, that is Martin Mutuko. Martin Mutuko is an MBA in strategy management, CEO and co-founder of Founders Freedom. Martin has a passion for developing African enterprises beyond the owner-operator. Yes, there's a problem when startup have that problem of that syndrome. I mean, how do we go past that syndrome to establish profitable entities? He has over 20 years experience in setting up governance structures, recruiting and retaining high capacity senior management teams that allows SMEs and young institutions to launch into a defined strategic growth phase and put in place the right systems and processes to sustain. We are told that if you can go for 90 days and your business is not surviving, you are not doing well. So we will know how systems play a part in cultural development. His vast knowledge of African region and expansive, please. There's somebody who needs to be muted. There's somebody. Thank you very much. His vast knowledge of the African region and expansive global contacts of key resource people enables him to establish mentoring and coaching opportunities for African entrepreneurs through relationships of trust. And we are told that for change to be effective, there must be trust. So he's going to tell us why is trust important as part of an enabling culture. Through his approach and support, numerous businesses have been able to unlock immense and sustained growth through both knowledge transfer and investment. Martin holds an MBA in strategic management from the University of Nairobi, and he is also the CEO and co-founder of Founders Freedom. When we come to the catalyst. We call her the lady catalyst. Is a catalyst for culture transformation. Damaris is a human resource management professional and an accomplished expert in culture transformation and organizational development. She has a vast experience helping leaders in public institutions, private and multinationals in developing culture of excellence, sound leadership, building teams, leading change, and management consulting. Damaris has a vast experience on influencing institutional policy through leadership, offering advisory on performance and governance in different platforms. Our passion for progressive change and productivity improvement has seen her design, support, implementation of organization-wide changes and performance improvement programs that have been implemented in over 70 institutions spread over 7 African countries and beyond. These include and not limited to World Bank, African Development Bank, ICRAF, AGRA, Ford Foundation, IRC, Nuclear Power and Energy Agency, and many others. Currently, she is a director OED and learning with Blue Concepts Africa, an organization keen on helping organizations build high performance culture, what we are going to talk today in Africa and beyond. She holds, she's a holder of Masters of Science in Management, Organizational Development, degree from United States International University, a bachelor's degree in Education, Economics, and Mathematics. Analytics. I thought it's only Ogut who can talk about analytics. Kumbe, we have another person of mathematics from Egerton University, a postgraduate higher diploma in human resource management from the Institute of Human Resource Management, and a licensed HR practitioner and a full member of the Institute of Human Resource. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the brief introduction of our 3 panelists, that is Bernard and Damaris and Martin. Let us shoot in case I've forgotten something that you need to brand yourself. Bernard, good morning. Tell us, what is culture in the context of workplace?
Morning, everyone. Thank you. First of all, I wish to say thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for the introduction. You've really given me a lot. I was just wondering, oh, do I really deserve all that kind of introduction? And thank you. My name is Bernard, and I wish to state that I've been in the area of strategy and its operationalization for the last 16 years in practice, both as a consultant and as an employee over time. And I'm really passionate in seeing strategies being implemented, passionate and to see a change in whatever we do or whatever we do in any organization. I treasure ownership and persistence on issues, in that when you have decided to undertake a particular issue, you go for it. Now, Richard, I go straight to what you've just asked me. When somebody talks about culture has been defined in different ways. But it takes me back home, and I tend to look at how we used to behave when my father comes in at home, and like people behave different. When my father goes, he used to work out away from home, and we could behave differently. Now I'm thinking, and is that the culture we used to have? And we have 2 cultures in different scenarios. You come to Africa, you hear many of us saying, no hurry in Africa. Is that a culture for Africa? Is it the way of doing things in Africa? You come home here in Kenya, we talk about Hakuna Matata. Is that the really issue? Is that the culture we're talking about? So looking at all these, when you focus also in the specific sections in this country, you will hear guys saying, the Luyas like ugali and kuku, is that the culture we're talking about. When we say being a Luo is a calling, it's a culture within the Luo. When we come down to the central region and we say we like Modokoi, that is our way of Modokoi, I believe. So is that the culture? And we keep on describing people in a different way, and it's not offensive. It's that's the way they are. Now, looking at all that, I tend to say culture is just a way of life. And if we want to bring it closer to work, then we can say culture is the work environment that surrounds us all the time. If you're at work, whatever surrounds you, the way people talk to you, the way people approach you, the way you relate to one another, that is the culture that prevails in us. And you can find even in an organization, culture varies. You go to a certain department, the way they handle themselves tends to be different from the other departments.
But Bernard, let me try and disturb you. There are people who could want to see you. They want to see how you look like. I hope you are in your best tie. There are people who are saying, hey, how can we have a trainer we are not seeing? Please let people see you.
Okay. Let me switch on this. How come my camera is not showing?
As we wait for Bernard to,
Damaris, you can work on that camera because I've switched on the camera, but it's not showing.
Yeah, you can proceed. We'll look for you.
Oh, okay, thank you. So culture is the work environment that surrounds you at all times. That defines the culture in which you exist. It is if I can personalize, I can say the character and personality of an entity, the culture, the personality. Can we define, if we look at an organization, can we define who that organization is? You can say, there's a time, sometime back, we were put in a place and we said, okay, can we define banks? And we were characterizing, giving them the characters and the values and the beliefs that this organization stands for. And that is all about culture. Now, as I dive deeper into your question, I can say that the shared values, the belief system, the attitude, the set of assumptions that people share at work is culture. This culture, we need to appreciate that the culture of individual entities, it is influenced or shaped by the social, the cultural context, the way where people are coming from, how they have been brought up, how they have been cultured, or how they have been nurtured, defines the culture that they have decided to sit together and agree on that this is how we're going to behave. In conclusion on that, I can say the culture is what makes your business unique. And it is the sum of its value, its tradition, its belief, its interaction, communication, the attitude, and the behavior of the people within that particular entity that makes culture. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much for that very elaborate definition of what is culture in the context of work. Martin, what do you think Bernard forgot in terms of enlightening us on what culture means? What is your view in your experience? What can you tell us? This is what I think also that should be added into the elaborate definition of culture. Martin.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I think Bernard did a wonderful job. That was really helpful and insightful definition of culture. Not much else to add. It's always a tough act to follow somebody like Bernard with his immense CV and understanding of this field. Perhaps the only one bit to mention, Richard, for our participants today is trying to understand the difference between tradition and culture. And the things that we do, the things that are just passed on from, history in their wholesomeness, whether they're good, they're bad, that's just the way things are done. Now that's tradition. Culture is a little broader than that. We get an opportunity to shape and mold our culture depending on what we want. You join an organization and there's a way they've stated this is our desired culture. And then you're able to look at what is the current practice and the space to move from what is desired, stated culture of an organization where things stand today. That is always a gap. And that's the tension, trying to close that gap at all the times. But it needs to be, this is where we'd like to be. This is the culture we'd like to be. My favorite is usually this is a corruption-free zone. That's a culture that's stated in that institution. But how is that lived out? How do we get to achieve that culture?
Martin, thank you very much. Damaris, you are one person I know. You have traveled widely. You've been involved in very many programs and activities about culture. You've traveled. Would tell us something about culture from the outside world. You've traveled, you've done work with international organizations. How do they define culture? How do they look our culture like? What can we define culture using your immense knowledge in traveling and training? In fact, we can call you the queen of cultural transformation, the catalyst of cultural transformation.
Thank you, Richard, for first of all agreeing to sit on that seat. It feels very nice to be in this side of the bench where I'm only rubbing shoulders with quite experienced people, which makes me feel good. I think going by my predecessor conversation, it's not more far from what they're saying, because culture ideally things that groups, organizations, societies, or even nations agree to subscribe to, or they just give permission for them to exist. And because it can be very broad, allow me just to focus more on an organization context. And that has been actually very well depicted from general relook on culture to more into organizations by Bernard, and also by Martin, defining, alluding to the things that are actually intentional, people are intentional about. And when I talk about people in a context of organization, it's actually leadership. And these things therefore form the way we behave, because we hear it's a way we do things, it's a way we execute stuff here, it's the things we permit and the things we don't permit as well. But allow me also to say, whether you're intentional about certain things or about your culture, culture will always crop, because people definitely will behave towards the things that they feel they're passionate about, or they feel sort of thrill, or they like. And as I behave in that way, or as they subscribe to those values, they think they like them, or they help them meet what they want, culture comes in. And the people who join organization find this kind of life going on, and they also subscribe to, if they're not so strong to influence it. So in a nutshell, culture it's just a commonality on values, things that we agree and give permission within organization, and span from behaviors, span from habits, span from the values, the things we perceive as valuable within organization, therefore we promote them. And this one also gets reinforced because culture now transcends in an institution beyond just the behavior to the structures that we put in place to reinforce those behaviors. Because a culture will exist, and those who know theories of behavior reinforcement, there is always a reward or a caution around that. So if we are permitting, therefore we give permission for this to continue. For example, if we come into an organization and you've been recruited and you realize, hello, here people actually come very early and they're comfortable about that and they're serious about what they do, guess what? You will just have to stream in and just go into the way it is done, and all of a sudden it becomes something normal to you, and therefore it becomes the way you do your things within your role. you might just come in and realize, oh, there are people who are actually more, what word can I use? There are more of people
right.
than
I
you
think, hello.
get. Yes, Richard, you can hear me?
Yeah. I thought I'd almost lost you.
No, I'm actually here. I can hear you as well. And therefore, when you see this pattern as an organization, then it makes you behave in a certain way, whether you want to go in or you want to play with precaution because of that. And therefore it influences all these things, whether it's intentional or not. The force will actually make you behave in a certain way. So they are the habits, they're the behaviors. And this is very critical because certain things affect our behavior in our workplace. And these drivers that influence our behavior are very critical in pointing other things like performance, like our wellness, about how we come out and chase our goals and achieve them. And this is the conversation where workplace people always have, whether it's toxic or it's good, it influences in these dimensions. And allow me to talk about something I'm really passionate, probably give us clarity in understanding that, because you're talking about enabling work culture today. And definitely I know at some point you will guide us towards understanding what's enabling and what's not so enabling about our workplaces. Because when we show up, and I believe this is for all of us, when you come to work, you definitely have your own aspirations that you're coming in to fulfill. You have expectations that you want to meet through your job. You also have some goals you want to meet, and all these things you hope when you come in, or you expect when you come in, at least the environment or the work climate will enable you to achieve that. Now, look, in the other side of the coin, it's the same, because the person who established that organ or that institution also has their own aspirations and objectives to meet. Now, if these two balances very well, therefore we say we have created a work climate that's enabling. And when you talk about enabling work climate, we're looking about things that we are all talking about, all passionate about, because I come into work, like Damaris, I will anticipate that for me to efficiently work, optimize my potential, probably I will need a more trusting environment where it is a bit transparent also, because from where I see, that's how I get to gather information I need. I get to communicate openly, and I get to understand, or I even get to make my team also understand the goals with clarity, and therefore it gives them permission to commit to the goals and engage with them. Some people also expect that people will be open to collaborate, and there'll be a bit of teamwork so that we can meet team goals. Those are aspirations of people coming in. Now, guess what? If these aspirations are not getting met, we get frustrated. Then we say this culture ain't working for us. We use the word toxic. We become stressful. We disconnect, and that affects our own aspiration, goals, and everything, as well as also the organization. So in a nutshell, that's what I would look culture in a broad sense. Magoma, Richard.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Damaris. Thank you very much, Bernard. Thank you very much, Martin. Now that we have been able to go into the first principles of knowledge acquisition, defining terms, knowing the boundaries on which we should operate in terms of definition. Martin, I can see Simon Frank has also told us that culture are a set of beliefs, values, assumptions, attitudes, behaviors, and metrics. And this is in agreement with the definitions that the presenters have given. What is this that is an enabling culture? What are these enabling beliefs? What are these enabling attitudes? What are these enabling values in an organization? Because, organizations have profitability, productivity. What are these? How can we inculcate these enabling cultures?
Asante, Richard. And that's a really good comment there by Simon Frank. It's we're here in this forum today, lots of people with different experiences. And I think it's a great thing to encourage our participants to comment, share their thoughts as well, so we are all learning together. Enabling work culture, in my view, is the process of creating a space that allows one to live out the desired organization culture. Now, there was a really good comment by Damaris earlier, and what she was trying to bring out is the place for I, as an individual that's going into an organization. I come in with my own, values, and I have my desires. How do I get to reconcile that with the organization's stated or desired culture? And that intersection is really, really important. Often than not, we will find ourselves in times that you're looking for a job, and you go through an interview, you've seen a position advertised, the skills are quite aligned with what you bring to the table, but you don't really get the time to interrogate the organization culture. And that disconnect goes a long ways in determining whether you're able to perform to our potential or not. Picture this. So you're getting hired by a company to be their marketing, head of marketing. It's a company that's in, agricultural production, for example. And, you join in and you realize that, look, your values, integrity, trustworthy, you like to do things in the open, be honest about what you're promoting in the marketplace. But you get to realize that the company that you're representing and selling their products is, practicing some unethical farming practices. And so in essence, what you bring into the market is, mangoes that have been sprayed some harmful chemicals. Now, how does that reconcile with your values? How are you able to go out with the confidence of pushing that product in the marketplace? And an environment that says, look, we're about innovation. The moment you come to the sitting table, meeting room, and you're trying to raise new ideas, no. That's not how we do things here. So what is the space for allowing these new ideas, inviting people to speak what's on their mind? Is the stated, desired culture of an organization what is really being practiced? And is that aligned with the individual employees? If most guys on this call are like me, I always like a good story. And I'll tell you a brief story about my experience, my very first job, 20 plus years ago. So I get hired by this company, and they really a small organization, right? Not many employees. And once I get the job, I ask, okay, so what's the plan? And I'm told, well, you're the one to come up with the plan. Oh, how are things done around here? Well, we're pretty simple. We only bring in, it's a membership organization, only bring in people that are known to each one of us. But now we have a goal of growing 10 times, and you're the one to lead that growth. All right. So taking the time to study the closed environment that this organization is growing and needing to challenge that if we are to hit that 10 times growth, and going through a whole experience, spending time with the chairman to understand how to go about and executing.
Pole, niko kwa training na ninatafuta nguo.
Okay. Kuna mwenye anatafuta nguo. Kuna mwenye anatafuta nguo, sijui ni Christine. Mary, can you mute her?
We hope atapata nafasi ya kusikiza tu.
Atapata nguo ya culture.
Yeah, I'm telling you. So anyway, really exciting times. My first job, fresh from college. And what dawned on me now, looking back in hindsight, I was able to get the organization to a place of taking some time away between the board and the staff to create a strategy that was to lead us the next 5 years. And through that conversation of crafting the strategy, it really helped us come to a place of documenting some of these things. And that was really, really important. What is our vision? What's the mission of the organization? Where are we? How do we collectively define success to be? What values do we then need to exhibit, need to practice that will allow us bring about this desired, achieve this desired goal of the organization? And, Richard, going through that exercise, articulating those things, documenting the company strategy, our values, that gave me a reference point to guide both the team I was leading and the board in shifting what was essentially a very haphazard, random way of doing things to a more structured, defined way that has a reference point of when we are evaluating success. This is a reference point. This is what we've documented as our desired culture here. These are the values that we want to ascribe to. And that always is important to me. When it's documented, that's the first place to start. And secondly, then you're going to get new people that are coming in. And so at the point of hiring and bringing on new people, whether they be staff, whether they be strategic partners that you're engaging with, people that you're looking to partner with and growing the numbers, even the clients themselves, the conversation around what we are about, what culture we are hoping to create here. We want people to participate. We want to hear from everybody. Are we creating those platforms? Getting people to be trained, to be made aware of what the culture is. That's the second bit. The third aspect is the structure that is then created to allow all these different people to have a voice heard. So you create an enabling environment where, as employees, you're clear on, okay, so who is doing what role here? What position do I hold? How do I relate with the next person? How do I get an opportunity to present my views? How do I get my performance evaluated? And I get feedback. Is my practice living up to the desired expectation? So that place of evaluation and constant feedback then allows us to constantly work on closing that gap between the practice and the desired goal. So that to me is, in summary form, having it documented, what is the desired org culture versus the practice. Number two, how do we make all the key stakeholders aware of what is desired and how to get there? Better yet, get to invite people to participate in creating that path to achieving that desired goal. And finally, providing forums of feedback and evaluation. So we are constantly reconciling and bridging that gap.
Now that you told us what is an enabling culture, for example, I'm wondering, like, I come for an interview. Thank you very much for that elaborate discussion on what is an enabling culture. Now, I come for an interview. How do I quickly assess that this culture is an enabling culture? Quickly, before I make a blunder and move from an elephant to a buffalo to the fire to crocodiles. How do I quickly, during interviews, do I assess that a culture, this I'm going to take, this I'm not take?
There's no easy way of doing that, but there are some pointers that you can pick out. During an interview, the time we are always looking at ourselves in the back foot of, you need to do your very best. You need to present yourself in a way that is acceptable for the people interviewing you. But having in your mind that this interview is actually two-way, you are also needing to check out this company and make sure it aligns with your values. And that gives you a very unique position to level the field. So for example, you show up for interview and like what Damaris was saying earlier, you show up ahead of time. And interview is scheduled for 9, so you show up at 8, and guys are still strolling in 8:30, 9. Well, that just by observation, you're able to see what's a culture like there. You're watching the way guys are relating with each other. Is it collegial, or is it yes sir, yes sir, yes sir? You can always pick up some of those signs of what exactly is the culture like here. So there are a few things that you can observe. Usually companies would have their value statements, hanging on the wall by the reception, and read up on that and then put it to test. You sat in that interview panel, let's say it's teamwork. Well, ask around, how will you be carrying out your work? Will you be working with the team? So in essence, you're trying to interrogate the things that are, is a desired, stated culture of the organization really what is being practiced? But for the most part, it really is observing They will take a bit of time.
Thank you. You are saying that before you take a job, you must be able to open your ears and feel the language, the actions. That alone, you will be able to draw some inferences. Damaris, now that Martin has told us something to do with an enabling culture, is there a difference between enabling culture and high performance culture?
Well, let me start by saying there is a lot of similarities, and an enabling culture is like a predecessor of a high performance culture. Listening to what Martin is saying, those are the key attributes that any great culture would want to have. And therefore, in terms of looking into the enablement element of a culture, there are those things that are enabling the employees as well as the organization to meet their objectives in a way that, you know, everybody is happy about, satisfied about, and therefore are able to bring their game on the table. Only the tweak I like using and explaining the difference is high performance culture is more focused on achieving specific goals and objectives. So we're trying to mobilize all our efforts towards meeting a certain objective and meeting our certain goals. And therefore, how does that one look like? Well, hapo kuna mtu ametumwa kitu. Mary, can you see that one? Sorry, thanks. Let me look into that. It's a bit of interesting conversations going on. And therefore, as a culture that enables, you know, trust between employees and management, at the same time is, you know, allowing employees to feel comfortable in expressing their thoughts, and that has been explained very well by Martin. Therefore, high performance brings in an element of metric. How are we playing this game of how we are behaving, how we are interacting, how we are executing our daily tasks, and are they measuring towards our certain objective, which is, you know, our goal? And this sense is where you hear terms like culture alignment. And when you talk about culture alignment, is are we behaving in a way that is speaking to where we are going as an institution? And as Martin has spoken about documentation, there is also the business element of documentation that comes in the business strategy of the institution. And therefore it is asking ourselves or seeing how our culture is now feeding into a business strategy. And it's going to enable us to achieve our goals and the business to achieve its objective in a specific and measurable way. And this goes down to talking about accountability, because high performance culture is very keen on personal accountability and how each individual meets their own.
Hold on to that thought. There is somebody who's telling me that if some of us reduce the video, we'll have enough bandwidth. So if you're not, some of us can close our videos so that we only have the presenter, so that we can have it. All right, thank you. You can go on, Damaris.
That's all right, but usually that is usually an issue of the person's internet. Because if my internet is okay, yours is okay, can't affect the rest of the people's bandwidth. But I hear you. So thanks very much for that. So in a nutshell, I would say in terms of difference, this kind of two elements enable each other. They sort of are very intertwined, because it's very hard to achieve a high performance culture if it is not enabling in the first place. Because, and I don't want to go back, because Martin has actually brought it very clearly what it means to have an enabling culture. It's more, even less to differentiate an enabling culture and a high performance culture per se, because high performance culture, first of all, has to be enabling. And therefore, you can say in a nutshell, enabling culture as it focuses more on creating the environment where employees feel empowered to do their best, and the business is meeting its own objective in a transparent, trustworthy, collaborative, continuous learning kind of way, because these parameters can be quite a number. On the other hand, therefore, we say, thank you for muting. We say also high performance culture will thrive on that to be able to meet the business objective. And so in a nutshell, we can be comfortable to say that just to define high performance culture in an it's that organization concerned to create a climate or an organization or environment that focuses on aligning individuals and the team's behaviors to the business or the organization strategy. And this culture therefore values, it's very particular about the values, the results, the accountability, and the continuous improvement. Because Eric Wariuko, kindly mute. Thank you very much. And therefore, then when we are very particular about results, about accountability, about what we do every day and how it fits to our goal, then you see we are all funding our efforts towards a specific goal, and then you measure in terms of performance. That's why I mentioned about metrics become very critical in this culture, and we are measured against a certain trend of achievement towards a certain area. And therefore, high performance culture is very performance-based. In other words, we will hear conversations about how we appraise people, how we are developing people to meet the critical skills they need to have to meet their own objectives in the strategy or in their work plans. It's very particular about that. It is very particular about developing people, developing the supervisors and the leaders to be able to enable that kind of achievement for everybody within the institution. They are very particular about, things like encouraging employees to do their best. They are particular to know whether there is a gap, whether you need, and they are very meticulous on doing things like training needs analysis to see where the gaps are every time, so they can be able to be meeting these gaps that may derail full execution of potential of everybody, because now accountability comes to the personal level, to the team level, and therefore to the organization level, and that quickly certainly forms a high performance culture. But remember, you cannot achieve high performance culture if you do not have an enabling work culture. Richard, over to you.
When we were introducing this discussion, Bernard mentioned values, Martin has mentioned values, Damaris has mentioned values. What are some of these values? Probably you can give us 5, Martin can give us 3, and then Bernard can also, what are these values? Because we want to know what are these kind of, is it happiness? Is it joy? Is it teamwork? What are...
Okay, sorry, I think you went mute there, Richard. Maybe it will be good to start by saying, when we talk about organization culture, first of all, it's good to understand, just like the way different people, I see Simon Frank is having a conversation, and William Masaka, allow me to mute them first here. Okay. So just like the way businesses are very unique, pursuing different kind of business aspirations, the culture also comes with its own uniqueness, just like the organizations. You will find institutions that are very passionate about charity work. They want to sort of help a certain segment of the society to be able to, achieve certain elements in their life and quality of life. And therefore, when you go in there, there are certain values that these people are keen and passionate about for them to do their work. So you'll find like there is, like in this case, which I find a lot in NGOs, there is there's a value like love, because we are going to find people who have been hit hard by life, and these people need love. They need to be appreciated or loved. So you can find a value like that. While you come into extremely commercial kind of an environment where we are very particular about the number of products that we churn to the market to meet the demand, and you realize things like efficiency and speed become very critical, and therefore they align their values across. So values are fundamental in fueling and accelerating the kind of behavior that we will, because we unpack our behaviors from the values we have. If we say here we work with quality, therefore you will see behaviors that are very keen in that institution, like behaviors that are very particular in this organization, like what is the span of turnaround for us to do in this process. So you find processes with very sharp and clear turnaround periods. You will also find behaviors expected, like the quality, and how are you going to be particularly enable the end product as is of the right quality. Therefore, the measures that are put in the product mixing and all that become very critical. Therefore, in terms of values, you can't say, it will be very hard to give a blanket kind of a value to everyone, except something I've found in government. Let me just say this in a higher respectful way, because in the most institutions I've worked in, most governments, I always find which values by they do you find very common in organization. Let me just see before I say mine. If you've worked with the government, which is this one value you always find it in those nicely laminated things in the reception? My people.
Integrity. I normally see integrity as one of the values.
Yes, you find
professionalism.
Exactly. Professionalism. We live together. We actually visit the same institutions. You will find number one, integrity. You work in a different government.
Meritocracy. That is probably
more in the private sector. So you'll find integrity, professionalism. The third one probably is usually teamwork, those kind of things. So yeah, it's easy to say, those things in a blanket way in the government, because you have a chance 90% of finding it's a value. But when you go to other, I'm not saying it's all the government, but I've found that to be very common in most of the government institutions. But when it comes to values, they are as unique as the organizations that they're in. So it cuts across, like we've seen here: meritocracy, fairness, equity, teamwork, professionalism, all those things are values, but you'll find these values here and in another place don't make sense because of the kind of business they do.
Thank you. Martin, what values can you give us? Give us like 3 what you find very common in organizations and they live well.
I'm sorry, Richard, say that again.
We were talking about which values can you give the listeners that you find common in organizations that you've visited, you've worked with, and they work. Some of the values, because we have mentioned the word values, so we want to know what are these values. Damaris has mentioned quite a number of them.
Yeah. Well, teamwork is always a fun one. We work as a teamwork, and it's a whole beautiful concept, team of teams, but reconciling what organizations actually mean by teamwork and what is in practice. Because most of the organizations are so hierarchical, and so the structure is very well defined, but allowing people to work across teams, that's usually a beautiful value that allows shared knowledge and getting people to learn from each other from different parts of the organization. So leaving out teamwork requires a really, really deliberate approach. It can get a little confusing when you've got people from all over the organization working across departments. Whereas you have a fairly well-defined structure. This is my department, these are my people. What do you mean you want 5 guys to go to marketing?
Silo mentality. Silo mentality comes up, right?
You're working in silos, but to allow for shared learning across the entire organization, leaving out that teamwork value becomes really, really helpful in growing an organization together. So that's one key aspect. Innovation, you find organizations talking about innovations like key value for us. But for you to really allow for that value to be lived out, you need to be able to talk to everybody, allow for space for guys to really hold their opinions, much as you disagree with them, but the space to really just say what people are thinking, bring forward the ideas, and allow for that idea to be interrogated, see what new ways of doing things are being coming forward. And you'd be surprised to find that some of the beautiful ideas that could make a huge difference in a company would come from the most unlikely of quarters. But you have to be deliberate to invite people to have the space, to have a voice.
Thank you very much, Martin. Bernard has been silent, and now we can be able to see him. What kind of these values, like 3 of them, kindly mention like 3 of these values that we need for us to move forward as a culture that is well enabled, well aligned. The cultures that are doing well, they have certain values. What are some of these values, Bernard?
Thank you, Richard. At long last, I sorted out the technological issues. Now I can see. Now, my colleagues have really talked of so many values in their speech, but one of them I can mention is respectiveness. Do you respect one another? Is there respect in the organization, or people feel that they are never respected? Even if you bring out an issue, that element of your seniority and others that are below, they never recognize, it ends up really filling up an entire organization. Another value is, I've talked about respect. I'm just trying to think, the one I had written down, Martin and Damaris have covered it. But these are some of the things that really prevail. The way, what people really value in day-to-day activities are things that carry weight to this particular people. For example, even acknowledgement, it's a value. There are people who perform so well. Do we really acknowledge them? Do we have a value when we reach out and say, thank you? You know, my daughter keeps on telling me that there are certain values that are taught at those classes, where they say, even sharing is a value. You get into an organization, and this is something very disturbing, that you are in an organization, but someone somewhere else in a department cannot give you the information you need, because maybe even the element of trust comes in. They don't want to share. And when you dig deeper, it's like, are they suspicious of you, or do they believe in you, or they don't believe in you? So all these values really contribute towards a complete culture in
Thank you, Mrs. Mew. Now that you've mentioned respect, and I can also add courtesy, sharing, why is an enabling a culture good for an organization? For example, what kind of enabling culture have you created at Nairobi Hospital? Why is it important for your excellence?
I will not go straight to the specifics of Nairobi Hospital. I will talk in a general way, and look at and enable everyone within this team just to visualize on what culture do they have at their institution. And I'll start from where Damaris started from, also Martin. And also it was like a learning point for, you know, Damaris said, we need to appreciate that every organization, the owners of that organization have a culture. And you, who is coming in to provide a service, has a culture. And in all these things, you need to ask yourself, is their culture, the organization culture, or the owner of the business culture going to fit in, or am I going to fit in that particular culture? And at that point, you make a decision either to go for that interview or entry point, entry point for all of us who want to talk about culture, and you get in there and you start complaining. It is necessary for us to really understand the owner of the business as a culture, and you as an individual going to provide a service in that particular organization, you have a culture. Are you going to dream down your culture so that you fit in the existing culture, or are you going to carry some of the culture that will be able to link with the current culture in that organization? And I've seen in many organizations, especially international organizations, in their interviews, they always ask, what do you believe in? And I think that is a starting point, especially in the recruitment process, where people who are new people who are coming on board, they should be asked that particular question. What do you believe in? You're coming to Nairobi Hospital. Do you believe in quality service to staff, to patients? Do you believe in this? If they say yes, then it means they are fitting into the existing culture of the organization. Otherwise, we miss out these, and these people come in with their own culture. And I've had in some situations where somebody says, I got a culture shock because what they were bringing in the organization is totally different. And some, they are coming into a very good culture. Some are coming into a very bad culture. But from the outside, you might not be able to really know, are these organizations giving me a good culture that I can fit in? Now, to go to your question, Richard, you've talked about why is it important to have an enabling culture? From what I've just spoken about, the first thing is that a good culture attracts talent. How many times have we seen very good companies in this country, Kenya, and you really long to join that company? And if somebody asks you, why do you want to join that company? You might start setting clear characters and beliefs, which you have perceived from your end that they must be existing in that company. And some of us, we might not apply in certain companies because you have already heard of their culture, which is not conducive, or it cannot be able to match with the culture that you have. So job candidates, when you evaluate them, it creates a good climate to have positive people who are the best in the market to come into that organization. It attracts them. But if your culture is not good, many people will run away. It also drives engagement and retention. A culture impacts how employees interact with their work and the organization. If a culture is not good, the engagement is not promoted. You cannot even get the right people. The first thing, you can't get the right staff on board. The second thing, you cannot even retain them. After a short while, the turnover of staff is extremely high. Besides the culture, there is the desire, anyway, people to move from one level to another. But there is that element that prevails within the organization that makes people to have the excellence. They keep on leaving the organization. You keep on recruiting. The entire human cost becomes very high. And that affects the bottom line of the organization. If it is profit, then you have lost it. The next thing, culture impacts on happiness and satisfaction. Here we are really focusing on the organization. Do we have happy employees? Do we have employees that are satisfied with their performance, with their work? Or people come to work because they have nothing else they can do at home? If they have something else that comes up, the first thing they do is to leave the organization. So the culture that prepares a good culture will enhance happiness, and happiness is very critical. You can imagine you're coming in an organization, you're already tired, and you're going to spend 8 hours or 12 hours in that place. Even the delivery of service in that particular place really goes down. So an enabling culture gives us happiness. Enabling culture gives us satisfaction. It has been from Deloitte, they did a survey and they linked happiness and satisfaction to a strong workplace culture. The other thing that most of us, we keep on running to, that if you have a culture, it is ultimate. This is an ultimate. This is the end of everything. End of a good culture, end of happiness, end of retention of staff, end of attracting talent and retaining it, is the effect on performance. Organization will be stronger with stronger culture, outperform their competitors financially and in general, brand and perception. Perception in that if you ask people out there, they will tell you, wow, this is a good company. It might not be making billions and billions, but it's very sustainable. It can see its future 20 years, 40 years to come. But with lack of proper enabling culture, performance, brand, everything, you might have achieved the brand or the good performance during the good days when you had a good culture. But when that culture was lost, that performance, that brand is diluted. Thank you, Richard.
Richard, you're muted.
I like the way you've unpacked the benefits of having an enabling culture, like you attract good culture, you are efficient, you're productive. In a nutshell, you're saying a good culture, at the end of it all, is happiness. And you've said, are people coming to work because they lack something to do? And if they get something to do, then they'll not come. Now, Martin, what is at stake when the culture is not enabling? Simiyu has given us the good things. What are the bad things that crop up when we have a disempowering culture?
Thank you, Richard. Yep. I think Bernard did a wonderful job there, running through some of the things we need to look out for. And now one aspect that he finished on, employee satisfaction and happiness, is such a key metric for creating an enabling culture for organizations. More often than not, the focus and spotlight is usually on the organization. But what is an organization? It really is all these individuals that are coming in together. And the more satisfied and happy they are, the more excited they are about doing their job. That collective effort is what then achieves the desired goals of the organization. And so creating that culture where people look forward to coming to work, people feel empowered to do their work, people feel trusted to make mistakes, learn from them. People feel they can make suggestions on how to do things better. There's a reason why it said human resources is your key asset. You can throw money at individuals, buy big machines, but if you don't have an ability to attract and retain your key people, then you're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to achieve your desired goals as an organization. So everything ranging from losing your key people, Richard, that's a major risk in not having an enabling culture. Key talent, they know, for me to perform to my optimal potential, there are certain things that need to be in place. I need to be able to feel respected. Bernard mentioned that. When I come to work, I know what I'm bringing. I'm really good at this. I've spent years going to school. I've got experience. I know how to do my work. But when I go to work, do I feel valued? Do I feel like my opinion counts? We're here talking about, we value teamwork. That's one of our key things in this culture. But teamwork means I do all the work and some guy takes credit for it. Where is the place for celebrating the entire team that delivered on that project. Secondly, you get the risk of very demoralized and disengaging. Why am I burning the midnight oil? I carried my laptop home, I lost sleep, I worked hard on this project, I made my contribution. And when the report is presented to the board, there is no mention of the people that really participated in that effort. That can be really, really demoralizing. You're contributing to the company, making tons of profits, and that wealth is not being shared with employees, whether it be in bonuses, employee shares. What is the place of distributing that wealth so people feel my effort counts? But one of the things that I found to be intriguing, we talked earlier about how it's important, even as you're looking for a job, when you're being interviewed, you're equally deliberate to interview the company that's hiring you. And you do your groundwork, you do your research, talk to former employees, read up their stuff online, observe, get there ahead of time or take some time before you leave and just observe the way people relate with each other. You may not have the ability to take in the full story before you sign on, right? So say they get to rope you in, but you get to discover that what was presented to you is not consistent with the practice that you're seeing. You still do have a chance of getting out. You don't have to stay in a toxic environment where you feel there's a major disconnect. This case deceived me. What I have come to find out about the leader, the owner of this business and the practices that actually go on as an accountant, it's in conflict with my values of honesty. I'm being asked to cook books. I'm being asked to do things that are not ethical. I do not want to do that. You still get a chance to leave. And here is a risk, Richard. The longer you stay, because you don't have anything else to do, you desperately need the money. And that may be your well and good. And it's a tough economy as it is right now. We're at a place where you have people looking for jobs purely for survival. So you can't be very choosy. But the danger with that is you end up stuck in an organization that's doing unethical stuff and word gets out. So when you eventually get to leave, you have a personal brand that has been affected. And now you'll go look for a job, in a good institution like Nairobi Hospital. And Bernard will ask you, well, where were you working before? We know those guys are crooks. That's the culture you're bringing here. We will not be able to hire you. Now you thought you were sticking along because you needed the job, but what in effect you've ended up doing is messing up your personal brand and making you undesirable to potential hires. The time you mention, your history, your previous employers, and places you've worked on, people start looking at you with suspicion. People suspect the kind of culture that you may be bringing into the institutions. And that's a place that we need to be able to, really guard very carefully, that we don't allow our brands to be affected in the name of, I'm just staying here because I have nothing else to do. We should be able to constantly evaluate, do our personal values align with the organization values that you're working with?
Richard, you're mute.
Thank you. Martin, thank you very much for telling us what we'll miss when we have a disempowering culture. There's so many things we'll have, whether it's capital flight, we'll have, even investors will leave you, even employees who are top performers will leave you. Damaris, how can we tell whether our culture is enabling or not enabling? How do we measure that this culture is enabling and this culture is not enabling? How do we look at it?
Thank you very much, Richard. That's a very interesting question. But I tell you from my own experience that sometimes it's hard to tell when the culture is, you will not easily hear the nice words when the culture is working. But when it is not working, that's when you will hear everybody's arms high and they'll be telling you what is happening. But if you were in there and you're keen on understanding whether the culture we have, you know, sort of tell where we are, how we look like. If you're keen on that, you know, there are many ways you can assess whether culture is enabling or not. And this process requires candidness and a bit of honesty and a thorough evaluation of the elements we spoke about culture, because that's the bedrock, it's a foundation of any culture. And this is values, policies, practices, traditions, the things that hold on how we do things in that place. And I know if I ask here, the professionals here, how they can tell whether theirs is working or not, I believe I'll get some insights from that, but just because of time, just let me mention some ways. And the most common way and easier way of telling how your culture is looking like is by observing certain metrics within the organization. And when I talk about metrics, don't go the rocket science of you know, data and stuff like that. When you look at, like, observe behaviors of employees, you can also observe behaviors of the managers or your supervisors. And then you will be able to tell whether these people, whether they are open or they're transparent or not. You can tell whether the way they communicate with that transparency and openness. And if you understand, and taking from the conversation we've been having, these are critical pillars of a great enabling culture: openness, communication, and all that. Do they collaborate and work together? Because from the onset, we've seen that these are the, you know, enablers that you're talking about in a culture. And therefore, if these things are lacking, you can confidently say, we seem not to be having an enabling culture. Another way is by use of surveys. And I know this one is not hard to find in most organizations. You can choose to just tailor some tools and measure certain aspects of your culture. And then you can conduct, for example, anonymous kind of surveys to gather feedback, get some insights from employees about certain things. And you can just be intentional about the things that you want to measure. For example, how do you get the perceptions about the culture? Ask questions about teamwork, about trust, about recognition, elements that reinforce behaviors or sanction behaviors like policies. Are the policies equally applied? Is there fairness? How do we interact with our leadership? Do we interact in an open kind of you know, environment where we feel confident to share information? Assess all these things, ask questions about work-life balance or imbalance, or opportunities for learning and development, because you're looking about these enablers within an organization, and we know them. That is well-being, recognition, reward, and communication, all these things, assess them. And therefore, what you get there will tell you for sure whether it is, you know, it will tell you the candid status of your culture. If that one doesn't work for you, you can as well look into some indicator like, you know, employee turnover. And this is a very explicit one that will tell you, my goodness, if here there is a popcorn kind of experience in this organization, that speaks to the culture. So if people come in, like I was talking about a friend of mine, exceptional, you know, expert in credit management, and you had been eyeing a certain role within the most, you know, high tier banks in the country, which he finally got in January. But I was speaking to them last week or and they were actually managing themselves out. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is happening? And the reasons they gave me were completely toxic culture, rigidity, and all that. So observing this, or even assessing, for example, if you're in human resource, you can actually do a kind of a tool and assess the trends of how do we look like when it comes to onboarding. I mean, we attract, we bring on board, how do they stay, retention, and all that. So turnover will tell you whether the culture is enabling or not. You can also look into performance, which is very common. Sometimes you see people coming fired up, and then their good performance, you know, in terms of competency, technical, they're good. When they came, the attitude just looked, you know, brilliant. But in some time, it's not one person, it's not two people. Then there is a pattern. You see, you need to assess and see, could it be the culture? And therefore, you'll be able to tell whether it is actually enabling or not. Another way is by what, and this is the most comprehensive and best way I've seen so far to be able to, in a more quantitative way, assess your culture, and it is through undertaking a culture audit, which is particularly tailored just to understand your culture. The approach you use and the frameworks will actually tell you whether your culture is working or not, is enabling or not. And this, just to speak a bit about culture audit, it allows you to evaluate, your company behaviors. I can hear someone's mic is on. I don't know who it is. Mary, maybe you could check. So when you assess this bedrock of cultures, because that's the role of a culture audit, its work is to assess the most fundamental elements of your culture, or the foundations of your culture, which you've mentioned, and others can be uniquely for different organizations. So you look into the behaviors, the practices, the habits, the traditions, the values, the work philosophy of that organization, and also the soft control aspect. When I say soft controls, is like the structural aspect of it, because culture is bigger than just the soft element. We talk about the policies and procedures because they influence culture a lot. It's the way we reinforce behavior. By rewarding people, we encourage them to behave in a certain way. Therefore, our reward remuneration policy becomes very critical, and how we apply it to that. And when you tailor that too, of course, and I mentioned it in a few minutes, there are many frameworks you can use to do that. Therefore, you can be able to generate a more 360 holistic look into the culture and be able to confidently actually present a report that quantifies the nature of your culture. And this one is a phenomenal approach that it's more quantitative. It's not like the way we say, it's a belief, it's a behavior. How do I put a metric, because the tool you'll use has to be able to be analyzed in a way that can be quantified for people, for it to make sense to people in a quantifiable way. And that's the beauty of culture audit. And in case you are wondering how to do this, there are various tools. I just mentioned a few. Maybe you could note down and go check a bit, because out here there are tools that have been designed to help institutions, professionals, leaders to assess culture, particularly because it's designed for that. And there are various culture audit assessment tools. I've written a whole article, a post in LinkedIn about a month or so explaining about this. So you may want also to look at that to help you do that. For example, you can choose an open research approach, which is most very thorough if you know how to do that, because most of the tools here are a bit opted easily, and they are cheap to not really cheap, but you don't need to do many subscriptions, because other tools you will need to subscribe to get the tools. And open research will rely on surveys, will rely on interviews, because it's actually a research kind of an exercise. You will rely on group dynamism, that is getting feedback from approaches like focus groups. Observation is very critical, especially from the onset. It works very much for consultants, because it's very hard to assess a culture until you observe and understand the main, the called concrete elements of the culture that are not easily, they are very tacit, not easily noticeable, because and they sort of drive everything. They're not easily seen, you find people talking about them, but they are in depth there, and they come more so with the founders of that institution, or the first people who sort of brought this organization into, and they still control the institution. So observing and listening enables you to get to know, here people actually have like family kind of interactions are very valued. You will not hear that people talking about it, but observation and listening to people helps you understand that. And therefore, when you go into designing tools and using the tools, you know what focus and trust areas to focus into. And that's the beauty of open research. There, besides that, and here, when I say open research, there are different frameworks, there are different tools that open research can allow you to. Experts can come. We have one that we've designed for the last 9 years for us, and I tell you why we did that. If you don't want that, you can just choose one. Like we have common one like Denison Org Culture Survey. It's already been prepared, belongs to a certain organization. You subscribe, they deploy it for you, then they'll tell you. And these tools for assessment have their own focus areas, okay? So when like you go to the Barrett Value Center culture transformation, they use values to assess culture, and they'll tell you what thrust in terms of what the organization values, and they give you measures and metrics around that. So you see what in this organization need to be valued more than others, or where we have placed more value, yet it is not more of a strategic approach. Then you have the competing values framework that is also used to assess. You can go to the common one, OKI. I know several people also subscribe to OKI, that is organizational cultural assessment instrument, and that sort of as particular pillars that it assesses within an organization culture. At the end of it, it gives you a report that will tell you how you look around. You look like across these elements of the culture, or drivers of your culture, if you like. There's also the culture IQ management platform, among others. But I tell you, so some you will go read for yourself, go try to understand all of them. Over the 9 years have been in culture, I've also seen there are some tools that will work in certain segments of the globe than others, because also, as you've seen, I think Bana started us from that point, cultures are very different. And some aspects will work in this area, will work in this kind of industry. It will not work for this industry. I'll tell you, African, we seem to have a very unique way of working. Those who work in multinationals will agree with me that culture plays a big role when it comes to even mapping other subcultures of other stations we have. And when you look into some tailored instruments, some aspects may not actually work for your company. They actually may measure something that is, yeah, you get the results, but it doesn't apply for your organization. Therefore, what we did for Blue Concepts Africa is we designed a tool that we call a framework for assessing culture, and it brings out the common. We work with 8 elements of the framework that focuses on the common elements and drivers of a culture, that if I get a minute, I'll be able to share for you so you see. And one of the critical elements, of course, is to understand what is the strategy and business, I mean strategy and strategic direction for that organization. Strategic direction is what tells you why we exist and what are we passionate about in delivering. And that comes with the values, which sometimes is called the philosophy that drives us. When you dig deep in the philosophy of the organization is where you will find the values of what drives the organization. What is the driving philosophy for this organization? And that is where you stem the culture, because that's what drives the culture. It will tell us the mission, which is about the purpose of why we exist and what we do to meet our vision and all that. And then you'll assess the leadership, because my goodness, let me tell you, as much as we talk culture here, we can influence culture, but when it comes to org-wide change for culture, we know where that responsibility lies. And I know Bernard will actually agree with me. When you're changing culture, there is where the calls get shot, all the shots get called from the boardroom. And therefore it becomes very big responsibility for the leadership to shape culture, especially when we realize we need to do something about it. So leadership becomes critical. And then you're asking ourselves, how do people, the leaders shadow the culture? Because they actually shadow the culture, and let me say, there's this common saying that we say, fish rots from the head. I don't know why they say that. Where I come from, there are no fish, so this is a good one for me. So what that means literally, that when things start going bad in an organization, especially in a cultural aspect, look just in the leadership. Because the values of the leaders is what gets shadowed in the organization. We will emulate them. If we call for a meeting and the manager or the director who got the meeting call comes in 20 minutes late, guess what? Nobody will come on time, because we shadow that kind of behavior. So the behavior, the values the leader quickly gets trickled in the entire organization. If we do not value recognition for good work, then guess what? Who will? Even my supervisor will not find the value in that. So what happens? We become a culture of where we don't recognize great, excellent job. And guess what that does to the Aulet? You know, all that works like that. So it's critical. I'm just mentioning some of the core dimensions of our framework where we measure, and there are 8, and I've mentioned first to focus on that. There's someone very excited here, and thanks for muting that.
No,
yes, so
it is Simon who's saying that we need Damaris a whole day, which means I'll cut you short. Because
thank you for that. I was actually winding up at that point.
Damaris, we really need to organize for a day, a complete day, so that we can talk about this. In fact, Gloria had asked about cultural audit. You've been able to put it there. That is, Martin, there's a question here of what is the role of HR in driving culture? So which means who in the organization should drive cultural change in 3 minutes, because we are almost we want to finish at the right time. Who in 3 minutes, who should be responsible for cultural change in an organization?
I'll pick it up from where Damaris has left. I think there's a lot to be said about leadership of an organization and their role in driving culture. Whether it's stated or not, whether we are deliberate about it or not, there's a role that leadership plays, because you start this whole exercise with defining. All this has to be stated in the company's strategy, and that's what I believe, that you need to have a documented way of where are we going to be playing, how do we win in this space. Now, that is the org strategy. And once you say this is how we'll win, to some companies, that will be winning at all costs. To places like, health institutions, we just want the numbers. Let's get as many patients coming in. We'll prescribe placebos or whatever it is. As long as they're coming in, they're paying. That could be one way of going about it, and you get, your bottom line, you get your money in. But you get what Bernard is telling us about Nairobi Hospital, that has differentiated itself as offering quality health services. So defining the space that you're playing in and how you're going to play to win, that in a sense embeds your values, your culture as an organization. What are you willing to walk away from if it's not aligned from your culture? You get a really, we talked earlier about government and bidding for those government jobs sometimes could be requiring a lot more than just putting a strong bid. Are you willing to go for it and do whatever it takes? We need that money, whatever it takes. Let's pay whoever needs to be paid as long as you get the job. Are you willing to stand up for your values and say, that's not going to happen? So some of those decisions need to be signed off at the leadership, and they are emulated by the employees. I came across a really interesting, I'm not sure if I'm able to share my screen here. I came across a really interesting tool that was describing one way of going about in leading and influencing company culture. And allow me to just talk through. It's pretty simple. It's a concept that most of us are familiar with. The bell shape curve. So picture this. You could draw that as we talk, or you could just picture it in your mind. So the bell shape, that essentially describes the way most people are. Most organizations are. You fit people, you can plot them within that bell shape. And on the front end, you've got your 2%, you've got your 2%, that's really the innovators, guys that out of their own innovation, initiative can go and do great things. They don't need to be told. They can come up with really creative ways of doing things. There's another 13% that may not be the innovators, but they will adapt very quickly to what has been innovated. They're ready for new things. They will jump on new ideas. They will try out new things. Those two combined form about 15%. That's a really, really crucial number. But then you're getting into the real curved part of the bell shape. You split that in half, you got your 34% on one hand and 34% on the other hand. And the first 34% is the early majority, and then you've got the late majority. But combined, those two form up to 68%. Thank you. Oh, this is beautiful. Asante sana. Waendelee kuchora bell curve. Nashukuru sana. So you've got your 2%, 13%, and you got your 34%, and another 34%. You're left with another 15, 16% on the other end. Those are what's described as laggards. Those guys will not do anything. They will only do it on the absolutely must. Alarms imelia or snooze marakumi. I just have to get out of bed. They will only get to do things when it's absolutely important. So here's a catch. You've got your 68%. That's a significant number of your employees in an organization. When you're looking to influence change, this majority are very practical people. They need a lot of convincing. They're not keen to try new things. And so whatever change you're trying to recommend, this is where you're going to get most pushback. And when you're getting pushback from the majority of your employees, it becomes extremely hard to move forward. You just throw up your hands and say, well, it's not going to work. Majority of people are saying it won't work. And so what's a secret? The key is to focus on your 2%, 13%, that combined formed about 15%. That is a critical mass. That is 15% gives you about the numbers you need to tip the scales. If you got to identify who are these people within your organization that comprise openness to new ideas and willing to try new things, and you brought those guys in, trained them on, at least created awareness. This is a desired company culture we want to create. And we know you guys are open to trying out new ways, and we want to work with you in creating programs, training programs, ways of living out these experiences. That invites them to participate in the process of creating the new culture for the organization. Picture this. We're shifting now from my days growing up and getting into the workspace. I grew up in a time of you do what you're taught from primary school, high school, then you get to campus and you're being invited to challenge the lecturer, have your own point of view, defend your thesis. That's a major shift. We're getting new guys coming into the job market that are very strong on their values and their opinions, and they want to sit and engage with you. So a significant shift from olden days of whatever the boss says goes. No, we want to challenge that. We want to have a conversation. So how do you design a product that shifts the culture of an organization to one where it's what the boss says is law to this is more an open environment that allows us to get to hear from everybody in the organization, get to make people feel valued, all right? So that approach, identifying the first 15%, working with them, training them, equipping them, and then sending them back into the organization. Now you've got change agents who are able to run and help you in driving culture from within. And it's no longer, Mr. Boss, Simiyu has said, Mr. Martin, the CEO, has said, you have people that are totally bought into this. They were involved in designing that program, and they are actively working on it. You get the other people, the majority now say, okay, some people have tried this. We see it's working. Now we can get on board. So in a short way, a crude way, without showing the diagram, you can use that bell-shaped approach in identifying how to influence culture change through your employees and get people within the organization to still rally with it, help you drive it from within and not appear to be forced on the employees from top to bottom.
Wow, I was seeing some graphs. You were getting mathematical, now it was getting tense completely. We need a day for real, a day, complete day. We sit down and do these things. Damaris, when does culture necessitate change? In 3 minutes, because we have like 10 minutes. In 3 minutes, when does culture necessitate change?
Thank you, Richard. And please, you stop me. You know how passionate I am about it.
I know I have to put some breaks.
I can
Yes.
talk the whole January, February, and everything. Yeah, let me just say that there are specific things that you will happen to your organization, and definitely culture will be affected, so it will be a trigger for culture change. And just to say that, for example, in Kenya, when we get a new CEO in Safaricom, what do you expect? I asked you that the other day. You will expect from president that there will be a change in business strategy, and that affects some elements of the culture. So they will be shifting some elements. So leadership change will trigger. And I've mentioned that because values of the leader always affect the culture of an organization and their behavior as well. If you have gone through an organizational restructuring or structuring, my friend, you know that of course shifts a lot of things in your culture. So anticipate a relook in your culture if those things are happening. Shift in business strategy, and by the way, fundamentally in our space of expertise in HR, in culture, we always say, if there is a shift in business strategy, it will always affect culture, because unless you are pursuing the same things you are pursuing in the other business strategy you had or business plan, you will likely will be retaining a status quo if it's the same. And I'll give you an example. A certain institution that we're running a culture, we were invited to do a culture transformation because there was a shift in the way they were sourcing their approach to market. And because their clientele had shifted from a desirable kind of institution they would want to go, then they were having a struggle to get the number of customer they were. It's a learning institution to onboard their program. So they had to relook, and what they came up with was a change in business strategy. And that does call for a culture change altogether, because people will be needed to behave differently. If you were just there as a clerk waiting for people to come and sign them up, now you need to go out and look for them. And therefore that calls for behavioral change. Employee feedback, I think I won't believe on that, because I've mentioned that. That will tell you aspects that we need to change because you're satisfied or dissatisfied a lot about it, about these things. So we need to change them. There is also external factors. And when we look at external factors, think about things that are out of the control of the organization. The other day we were treated into a new legislation touching on pension of our employees, on how we administer that within organizations, and it touches on aspirations of the employees. So we have to align according to that change in legislation. Legislation has nothing to do with our organization, it just comes from the government. So we will change some aspects on how we do things here in the organization. There could also be things like crisis. And I say crisis because we are coming from a pandemic. We cannot come to the office. Our work structure and how we do our business is to come into one place, so we report into a certain station, and then we run our operations. But look here, we cannot do that. So what do? You guys are here. I know there's a lot of structural policy issues, and then all that you had to manage behavior, your culture, your communication. You changed a lot of things because you were triggered by a crisis. And those are triggers that can actually call for change, especially your culture change. So in case culture change requires a deliberate, and a sustained effort from leaders, and you cannot dissociate this with leadership, because these are decisions that are made by the leadership and implemented across board by the staff. Over to you, Richard. Are you mute, Richard?
There's a controversy who said culture eats this what for breakfast, this for dinner, it's operational excellence. People say he didn't say it, he's not the one who said it, but that is not the issue. The issue is, how does culture eat these things, operational excellence? It eats some things at dinner, it eats something at, what are these things being eaten?
Okay, that's to me?
No, Bernard.
Okay.
I love strategy. I've been in strategy for some time, and strategy is good. You know, when we talk about strategy, strategy gives you a point of advantage. When we you know, most of the time, every time you will hear someone asking another, like, hey, what is your strategy to get there? And, you know, what is your strategy to win the election? In relationship, we talk about which strategy are you going to use to reach to that lady there. So this is something that's worked in us. And the most important component here in strategy is strategy gives you a point. But there are many people who want that particular thing. We are many people, like in the health sector, we are many people who want that patient. How does it make you better than the rest? Next, another thing we talk about strategy is strategy gives you a competitive edge over the other. Strategy is very key, and it's something that operates within us. We apply it every day. We apply it in our houses. We apply it even when we are driving to work. Which strategy are you going to use to be able to reach out to your goal? Now, after having known what strategy is all about, we have this set of values, culture, sets of beliefs, sets of attitudes that you have. And these sets of culture, these sets of beliefs often are very important in determining the success of your strategy. At the core, implementing strategy ideally depends on some two essential elements. The first one is building and sustaining an organization culture that facilitates and accelerates change. For you to be competitive in the market, or for you to have a point of advantage in the market, it means that you are always focusing to understand what the market is all about, what you require in the market, what is happening in the market, how do you adjust yourself. Now you can imagine you have a culture that does not allow adjustment, a culture that is not flexible, a culture that takes so long to make decisions to get to where you want. And the market is so dynamic. Today, it is this. Tomorrow, something else comes up. How is the culture promoting that element of accelerating change within the organization to be able to allow the organization to fit in the changing environment? Now, the second aspect that is very critical is fostering a sense of personal accountability for the strategy. Strategy is never executed in a group. Strategy is managed and handled by a person. And that person must demonstrate ownership at every level of implementation, from the administrative assistant, from the lowest cadre to the highest leadership in the organization. And those are things that are very essential to make sure that strategy has been implemented. So therefore, it is key to construct a culture that creates the flexibility, the understanding, the acceptability of responsibility for change. Now, strategy demands for change. And here you have a culture that do not believe in change. You have a culture that do not promote listening to each other, a culture that does not understand where the organization is going to. So the quote now applies. The quote says, let me read it, culture is strategy for breakfast. So this means that no matter how good you are, how your strategy has been done by a renowned strategist, by a well-designed model, it will fall flat unless your team shares the appropriate culture. If the culture does not support it, your leadership is there, but they are not owning personal, they are not taking personal responsibility, and there is no opportunity for flexibility to change, culture is eaten in the morning. And it can be added for lunch also. Thank you.
Richard, we can't see your mouth, so we are not sure whether you're eating lunch or
I don't know.
breakfast.
It is because there's kelele here, and then the administrator anafunga sasa anasahau kama imefungwa ama imeshafunguliwa. So the question, Martin, is you have known this enabling culture. These are the values we want. You bring a consultant, you bring probably Damaris to do a cultural audit. She does her thing, she brings all those tools, but the people who are resisting what they are paid for are the directors. How do you manage this? That is a question by Jeremiah Muthoka. The people who have paid you are the ones resisting the change.
Well, naturally, we are resistant to change.
Yes.
And that's always a curious case that the people that are paying you are resistant. Because this is what they paid you for. And in essence, you've done your work by holding the mirror and telling them this is what you need. Now, as to what you do with that, that's really up to you. Because ideally, Richard, it is the that senior leadership that's supposed to be buying into and running with it. If you don't get it at that level, then it becomes extremely hard to drive change for an organization. But here's the thing. One of the things that Bernard talked about was the place of strategy. And if you don't have the right culture, then you're wasting your time designing a good strategy. Because if you don't have a conducive environment to execute that culture, execute your strategy, the toxic culture within the organization will not allow you to realize your goal. My response to that is you need to equally evaluate. Once you've designed your strategy, you need to equally interrogate the kind of structure that you have that allows you to execute your strategy. So the organization structure requires accountability, right? And so if you're going to go all out, spend time and money designing an organization-wide strategy, then it assumes you have a corresponding structure, the vehicle that allows oversight and accountability in ensuring and following through to make sure everybody is playing their role. Everybody is doing what they're supposed to do. So the senior management, who are they reporting to? Is it the CEO? Who is the CEO reporting to? Because ultimately, if you have a governance structure that has a board in place, even that board is appointed by the shareholders. And so you need to have an accountability mechanism that provides for checks and balances at every level. That is your surest bet in ensuring that you will have any chance of success in executing your strategy. So such accountability mechanisms go all the way through the organization. So then you're able to check, this is the desired culture that we set for the organization, the desired goal that we hope to achieve from an organization. How is everybody playing their role in collectively achieving that desired organizational goal? How am I aligning my personal values with those of the organization to achieve that goal? You cannot have people within the organization that are sabotaging that change. And if there has to be a mechanism of identifying them, pausing for corrective measures, That might include getting rid of them. You've read of CEOs that have been let go, senior management, and all these people, if they are a stumbling block to achieving the organizational goal, which without the right culture, then it becomes impossible to achieve that strategy.
Thank you very much. Martin. Bernard, me and Damaris are in very many groups, and one of the most commonest question is, I am in a very toxic environment. How do you deal with a toxic environment? In 2 minutes, as we come to a close of our conversation.
Richard, that's a very difficult question, but if we look at the culture, I think one greatest thing that we need to appreciate is that culture is personal. If I am in an organization and we have people around me who are not working or they're not performing, and I take a personal decision to follow them, it's me who has a problem. But slowly, I get to influence a few people. I refuse to join the culture. I refuse to join the values that are there because, truly speaking, in any organization, values are not 100% shared. There are certain people who are not for the fact. There are certain people who are for the fact. And the way Martin has brought it clearly, you will find that a certain percentage supports that toxic environment. But there's a certain percentage of people that feel that is not right. Everything or things are not going the way they are supposed to be. Out of that, decide as a person to do what is right. Don't do things because the organization. Martin gave us a good example here when he said you join an organization and all they do, there is practices, they manipulate books. Decide, are you going to join that wagon or you're going to make a decision to do what is right? You better be sacked for having done what is right, and somebody will once remember you. What you did, I know we are in a very difficult economic situation, but sometimes, as earlier said, you will leave that organization and that tag that has landed on your brand will always follow you, that you are the people who failed that organization. So make up your mind. Sometimes you do these and you never know. Those who believe in the Almighty God, they will always get an opportunity to get another. Now, how do we help to create a very enabling environment as entities? Although it's very critical for senior management to really run. First thing, effective collaboration and working as a team is very critical. Work as a team. When you work with a team, you develop a certain culture within that team. Remember, it's a personal accountability to institute an effective culture. Culture will never come as a blanket. It is you who deliberately make a decision that I am going to do what I'm supposed to do. Why am I hired to be in this organization? So when you join up and work as a team in collaboration, you might inspire those people who are losing the psyche to pick it up and say, oh, in our midst, we have a few people who want to run and give the best. So that will be one of the things that can bring change in collaboration, not working as silos all over, everybody working on his own and doing his own thing. The second thing that we need to do is commitment to employees' personal action plans. You have a plan, you have a strategy, you have plans that have been cascaded downwards. Are you committed to doing what you are supposed to do, what you have planned to do? Are you committed to seeing it to completion? Or you want to follow what others are doing? Sometimes I purpose in all my day functions that I will do what I believe is right. I'll try to pull a few people who can run with me. Change does not come in a day. It will take long, but in the process, a few people will be seen. Unless you are the top management is not for you. Then as you continue doing something good, you might be out of your organization. But as long as you're still there, you are there for a reason. Another thing is open dialogue with senior management. Senior management, they might be positive or negative, but as slowly those people who want to bring change, they interact with senior management. Sometimes senior management might be lacking some info, and it makes them, because sometimes they rely on many people around them to tell them things that are happening in the organization. But immediately an opportunity comes and you have an interaction with the senior management and tell them what you're doing or what is your really purpose of what you're doing, they start appreciating there's really change that is coming in. At the same time, the organization, as senior management, kindly, as if when you are in those high positions, try as much as possible for you to motivate and people to appreciate your culture. Try to demonstrate that you are concerned about the well-being of your staff. If your staff know and believe that you are concerned about their well-being beyond the benefits you're getting from them, they are ready to devote all their efforts to giving what the organization wants.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I want to cut you short because you mentioned collaboration, you mentioned involvement. I want to give the audience, because we started 10 minutes late, so that they ask, I'm sure some of the questions have been preempted, like measurement of culture measurement, the metrics, and the how do you manage change and all that. I want to give, if you have something that is burning and it has not been mentioned, you can unmute yourself and direct your question to somebody, or if you have something to comment, we want to close at exactly 12:20. So we have 8 minutes. Truncate all your contributions so that you can have quality, the next quality 8 minutes. If you have something to say, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Richard, Bernard, and the team for bringing out the issues of culture. I'm happy that you've been able to address the issues of culture and how the environment needs to be conducive if you want to see the best performance of your staff. As I noted earlier, the senior management has a role to play in terms of bringing out the best in every staff. If they cultivate a very good culture, then definitely the staff will want to stick around and do the best they can. And thank you, Bernard, for bringing out the issue of performance work planning and the issue of how the change needs to be brought, even if it's one strategist who is available, who can be the seed for the culture change. And that is very vital in most of the institutions. Thank you very much, panel. Very good topic. We very, very much appreciate the effort. Thank you.
Thank you. You are full of gratitude. We appreciate you as well. Damaris is waving in the air because of the contribution. Somebody else? I've seen my good friend Anne, but I'm sure you're burning to say something. Anne Bahati. Come on, Amanda. All right, if you have got something to say, please.
Hello, Richard. Hello.
Hello,
Yes,
hello.
we can
hello.
hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard and Damaris. I'm very excited about what has happened today. And as I've said, we need at least a day for Damaris to give us the insights which she has been speaking about. And also my thanks goes to Bernard and Martin. Of course, culture has been a problem to many companies whereby they fail to drive performance, especially efficiency and inefficiency. So I'd like to have Damaris again with arrangement of Richard, who has been arranging so many things for us. So that is what I have to say today. Thank you very much.
We will make sure that Damaris, you take us to Eka, you take us to somewhere, maybe Naivasha, you talk about those tools. So we'll do that. We have to make sure that she tells us those tools. Even me, I'm interested in those tools. Yes, somebody else who has something that is burning. We have 5 minutes.
Hello.
Yes, please. Go forward.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Very loud and clear.
This is Gerard.
Yes,
Yes,
Gerard.
Thank you
Gerard,
very much. Thank you very much, Damaris, Bernard, and Martin. That is a wonderful presentation. You are so resourceful, and I cannot live without making one or two of your comments, which are very, very burning.
I wonder if I'm the only one who's not hearing Gerard.
You cannot hear me. Can you hear me now?
we can hear you from where I am. I can hear you.
Yeah, you.
Can you hear me now, Martin, Richard?
Yes, yes.
Okay, now, workplace culture cannot happen without happiness in the organization. And according to a study, happy culture increases productivity by 12%. That is Warwick University study a few years ago. And happiness culture is stress-free and is conflict-free. There has to be a way of managing conflict. And one of the issues is effective communication and productivity. However, the benefits of the proactive work culture, it creates employee productivity and higher profits. And also there is risk mitigation. For us to make a work-free conflict culture, it starts with the hiring process. Somebody, I think Martin talked about that, Damaris talked about risks. The risks that we know about in employment and why you are hired is because there was a risk in that institution. There was no productivity. There was no profit. And when you hire, the hiring process or the hiring cycle is very, very critical. Who are you hiring? What are the credentials? What is the knowledge? And if we go to what Martin talked about, behavioral and team building culture, an organization is made between you, me, and others. Now, every person as an individual in the department has got a role to play. And from the department, it goes to the team. And from the team, it goes to the executives. We are always having a problem because we are not analyzing. But I liked it when Damaris said, and Martin, you want to start a strategy, but it's going nowhere. Why? Because those who chose that strategy to be done, in between the way, becomes now the roadblock. There are so many risks because what they were thinking about was just passing time. The role of employee, if you want to know the metrics.
Thank you, Gerard. Gerard, thank you. We are 20 minutes past our closure. I will sample a few comments, then the three participants, will be giving us the parting shot. Joseph has said very informative. Rosemary Millicent has said, thank you very much, team, for this insightful conversation on culture. Elizabeth Okumu, very insightful and interactive. We have Paris, very interesting and helpful, highly appreciated. Bernard. Good. Richard, you have to bring the toxic Mamba chemical squad. Yes, senior management are problematic. Martin, parting shot in 30 seconds.
Thanks, Richard. My parting shot is centered around the individual. So on one hand, we need to take personal responsibility of our personal brands. That's what we bring to these organizations. When you're interviewing for a position, please be aware that you are bringing value to the organization and your values. Make sure you're interrogating, you're making sure they are aligned with the organization. Number two,
Thank you, Martin. Bernard, your parting shot in 30 seconds, then we go to Damaris.
Short is that we will only have success through creating and reinforcing a culture of change. Top-down employee buy-in, strategy ownership, implementation, and accountability is critical. Thank you.
The Queen of Cultural Transformation, the catalyst, your parting shot and additional information. When do we hijack you to go to Naivasha or Mombasa, or I don't want to mention Malindi or Cliffy because of the obvious.
Well, I think, Richard, I even think my 30 minutes are over by now. Yeah. So what I would say is, and please allow me to say something, because I saw a question somewhere asking about that leadership element. And it's very critical, because I also get questions on when at the level where I am, what can I do? Because when you look at it, stuff bear the old toxicity in the workplace. But what I can say is, if you are existing in that culture, want to do something, you need some skills to be able to build a case and move it upwards. You will, however, need to lobby for support for that, because it's always good to get some momentum through support. If it is a leadership who is now not saying yes, then you will need either to build a better case. But let me emphasize on this one, because there are some things you can only do to this much. And I tell people, if you are the aim of change, and listen, if you're an HR, because HR is a domicile department for this kind of change. If it is getting to you, you've tried all the means you can, and it's getting to you, it's affecting your health, you can't sleep because of stress, it's getting you to depression, it's not worth it. Run, Murife, run, if I tell you that. At that point, you can have the freedom of living. But remember, you've got to have done your best for you to do that. To get to my parting shot, of course, it's a lot, because you need to understand, yes, we've gotten to a point we need to change. But how do you roll the change? That's another old game, because the how can also make sure you succeed or not. And I think that's a conversation for another day. If you're keen to know how you can implement one, or you are in the process of doing one, please DM us, leave your contact there. We will get in touch and see how we can help you, and what model we can recommend for you as well. But for me, thanks very much for joining. It's been very insightful. I can see the chat is flowing with such an amazing, gratitude and value for the session. Thanks for those who contributed in the wisdom, because we also learn even when in this side, as from Damaris. It felt good to be in this side of the panel. But I think Martin Mutuku was concluding a statement. So be kind, with time. Richard, I have 30 seconds remaining. Over to Martin.
Oh, I thought we were supposed to finish at 12. Actually, it was bouncing off. I wasn't getting completely. It is 12:30. Is it 12:30?
No, 23. It's 12:24 now. So
we're finishing at what time?
No, it's okay. What I was saying, you can conclude what you wanted to say, then we can bring it to
okay. Okay, yeah. Martin. Go ahead.
Really kind of you, Damaris. No, thanks. Richard, excellent moderation through the sessions. I'll also make a simple point of how, as individuals, we have a role to play, not to play victims. And Damaris reinforced that, even in positions of leadership, we need to come to a place of knowing you've given your best, and it's not worth losing your mind, losing your health while at it. So let's take personal responsibility, aligning the values we bring with also the organizations, and take charge. So thank you.
Take charge. I love that. Now, we have like 66 people in your language. Appreciate your language. Say thank you in your language. Say thank you in your language.
Yeah, they can as well tell us one thing they have learned. We'll appreciate to know what they have learned as well. That is French.
Asanda mono, that is
Asanda ori mono.
That one sounds familiar. Asanda la sounds familiar.
Mnemovea.
Biamono.
I can see.
Thank you. That is a co-opted English.
Yvonne, thank you. Asanda, Ruth Nzilana, Asanda. Simon, asante. Newega.
Thank you, team.
You are very happy, Grace. Winnie, merci beaucoup. And you need to answer some case. Esther Mushiri, thank you very much. Purity Smiu, Kwasma. Yoni Awap.
Guys, that sounds like that's saying there is ugali.
It's Watima.
Gongoi missing Helen Ruto. Dankeshon, that is Ruth Dilani. German.
Obrigado.
Daniel, Yoni Awap. Ama singing. That must be Taita or something.
Something as indicated.
Simon,
oh, thanks very much.
Amharic, Lydia Gadenya, Mahinda Mega, Maggie.
Mahinda. This is very exciting, Richard. Amharic.
Thank you.
So thanks very much, everybody. You have a great weekend. It's been a pleasure to collaborate on these ones, Martin. I actually learned a lot from your contribution on the table. Bernard, strategy as always, you've got a lot to bring on the table. I look forward to having you back on the panel sometime in the future events. Richard, as always, definitely we will have to look for a day to go to Naivasha. Isn't that right?
Yeah, we have to. We will invite Frank. We'll make sure Simon comes from wherever he is and comes to Naivasha.
Absolutely. So thanks everyone. Have a great weekend, and thanks for joining. We will end it at this point. Yes, I see the greetings are still coming through. I need to learn all these languages. It's exciting.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Damaris, Blue Concepts team, for coordinating and hosting this event. It's been a real pleasure to participate. Blessings in your weekend.
It has gone very well.
Martin. Thank you. The pleasure is all to us. It was an honor to have you on board.
Thank you, Martin. I've learned a lot. I think I should be among the audience also to really tap into your great mind. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.